was wonderful. Well, Wayne and I are going to do the next part together too. This is a together morning. Actually, it almost doesn't really need an introduction, right? Because I sort of mentioned already what we talked about during the week. What we decided to do this morning is this is going to be interactive. So start thinking. We actually started thinking about very specific things that we are grateful for, that we are looking forward to and anticipating. And Wayne came up with some really wonderful examples. And we're going to see if we have some more examples from the floor. And this is how we're going to build today's sermon, basically, is adding the whole thing up together and being aware of where we're headed and what we have to look forward to. Because there's a lot, right?
Sure.
So I'll let you. Wayne wrote some wonderful emails to me, kind of like summing all of this up. So he's going to take this part.
Okay. I wrote a little bit about anticipation, talking about the founding fathers. The founding fathers of this country must have had great anticipation for what democracy could be. They had to clarify their ideas in order to bring this country into being. They had to free themselves from oppression, but they also had to free themselves from the familiar. If they didn't have ideals that they could anticipate bringing into being, there never would have been a revolution. We would have been part of the British Commonwealth to this day. We don't need to think of ourselves as being stuck in a liminal state. We can anticipate a better future as well as work towards it. Working towards a more ideal state gives us strength. Some examples of what we might be looking forward to as a congregation. We will have a new minister for whom it is a homecoming since she used to be a congregant here. We must welcome her back. We will have a beautiful new building in a natural setting in which to conduct our activities, one whose beauty and prominent location could attract new members. We will finally have an excellent space and play area for our RE students. With Reverend Viola being the minister of both Glens Falls and the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Saratoga Springs, we will have more of an opportunity for cooperation between congregations, especially when it comes to finding speakers to fill pulpit dates. Reverend V will not be preaching. We will be able to celebrate the achievement of moving into our new home after years of planning, hard work, and fundraising by the leaders and volunteers in the congregation. And we will leave behind the doubts and fears we had about actually being able to achieve our objectives. We will face new challenges with the sense that we can meet them when they come, given all we have overcome in the past several years. We will remember that a congregation is not the space in which it worships, but the spirit of its community.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I know. So well put. I want to introduce you to Henry Nouwen. If you're not familiar, you may be familiar. I'll give you a little background. Henry was a Dutch Catholic priest, theologian, psychologist. He lived from 1932 to 1996. He was a spiritual writer, well known, widely read. His work has found readers far beyond Christianity because he wrote less about doctrine than about the universal experiences of things like loneliness, friendship, vocation, grief, and the search for God. He was ordained as a priest in the Netherlands, but he taught at the University of Notre Dame. He taught at Yale Divinity and Harvard Divinity. He also wrote very candidly about all of his own struggles. And in 1986, he left academia to join the L'Arche Daybreak community near Toronto. Anybody familiar with that wonderful world there? It's a community where people with and without intellectual disabilities share life together. They're beautiful spaces. He describes something called active waiting. And that's what we're talking about this morning. The idea of active waiting, not just waiting, not just anticipating, but active waiting. He says that active waiting is essential to the spiritual life. In our mostly active lives and fast-paced culture, waiting is not a popular pastime. It's not something we anticipate or experience with great joy. In fact, most of us consider waiting a waste of time. We wait with patience. The word patience comes from the Latin verb patuar, I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, which means to suffer. Waiting patiently is suffering through the present moment, tasting it to the fullest in the belief that something hidden in there will manifest itself to us. Isn't that beautiful? Waiting patiently is in many ways suffering through the present moment, tasting it to the fullest, but understanding that something hidden there will manifest itself to us. When we know, Nouwen wrote, when we know that we are God's beloved and we are free to live in the house of love, all patience is co-patience. Suffering with the suffering of God, thus suffering and compassion can give birth to new life. Active waiting is being open to the promise yet to be fulfilled. Patient waiting is staying in the present moment. Expectant waiting is trusting that this long process will bear fruit. And then the writer Simone Weil wrote, waiting patiently in expectation is the foundation of the spiritual life. Waiting patiently in expectation is the very foundation of the spiritual life. A lot of beautiful stuff in there. Active waiting, patient waiting. Anybody like waiting? No, we want answers, right? We like resolution. We like certainty. We like to know what's going to happen. But what we understand is that in that time, in that period of time when we're moving towards something, there are lots and lots of beautiful things, not only that can happen, that can be revealed, but also that we ourselves can create during that time, right? We can be very active co-creating during that time of anticipation. So I'm very curious, Wayne and I are curious, if any of you would like to add to his beautiful list of what active waiting is looking like for us here in this community right now. He had some wonderful examples. One of them that's a wonderful thing to remember is that Reverend Viola will be the minister of both Glens Falls and here, which creates a bridge between those two communities. And there's no doubt that beautiful things can happen with that bridge. Anything else? Yeah.
I want to tack on to what he said about the founding fathers. I've really been on history junket. And so on Netflix, I watched a documentary on FDR, a documentary on Teddy, and a documentary on Abe Lincoln, and then started one on Thomas Jefferson. Oh, so I'm grateful for those men who I look back and thought, oh, how comforting that is to know that the people who cared enough to take that step Wayne was talking about, to found a new country where so far we can say what we want without being jailed. The second thing is more personal. I leave Wednesday for Montreal and I'm driving by myself over the border. Now that may not seem like a big deal because I've driven 14 hours trips to east, south, west, but I have this anxiety about going across the border by myself. I'm going to meet a friend and we're going to go to the jazz festival, but I'm finding this really anxiety producing and I'm thinking, why am I so worried? And my son, who knows me, says, Mom, when you go across the border and they're looking at your passport, don't get chatty.
That's funny.
So I said, okay, John, no, I'm not going to get chatty when I hand over my passport. But if any woman, I'm sorry, I don't mean to, exclude men. But for me, I don't know. There's this anxiety I'm having, and I want to embrace this active listening and be a little more calm about it.
Mhm. Well, I think what you speak to is something that actually can be generalized, right? That some of us, not knowing what's coming, can also allow ourselves to just live in a state of anxiety. But we know, of course, that it does very little that's purposeful,
Yeah.
right? It really is kind of, in many ways, a waste of actual energy. So you can choose, you always have a choice, right? We have control over this. You can choose to think differently about what's coming, right? So rather than, which is very, very human to be worried about the unknown, right? What you're talking about is the human condition. Whenever we don't know what's up ahead, it's a blank so far. We have this amazing imagination, and what do we start to do? What do we default to? The worst case scenario. I mean, that could be a biological imperative to keep us from being eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, but they're not waiting around in the bushes anymore. So it doesn't serve us anymore. It's a matter of training your mind to decide it's going to be okay. So let's default to the best case scenario. And why not? Why not, right? Yeah.
Midterm elections.
Things to look forward to. Okay, great. Okay, how about here in our group, in the world here and where we're headed? What else do we have that's wonderful to take with us? And do you want to add anything to the conversation? No. Okay. What other things? Yes, let's hear it. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Diane?
Yeah, Diane. Sorry.
All right. I'm just thinking about the chronology and sort of what she was sharing, remembering where we've come from, and just sitting here, what my perspective in this chair is a miracle that we had people talking and proposing a new place years ago, right? Victorian house, remember? 2 stories here.
Yes.
And then we decided we had a pause. Then we did 2 capital campaigns. We did a lot of talking. We talked about purchasing several properties. We collectively selected that property. The trees came down. We did a ceremony over there. We have this on the market, round 2. It looks like it's proceeding. A minister we had for 10 years left. 10 years is awesome. Reverend V is coming back. That's sort of like a miracle for those of us that know her. And hopefully all the newbies who get to know her will enjoy her giggle too. And that we moved out 90% of the things last summer. We're looking at Wilson Chapel, which is a great in-between space in the trees. I'm just sitting here really thankful for this chronology of how things have taken time, and we've all been on this journey together, and I just have faith, and Art has proven this to me. We're in a method which we will get there. And it's really amazing for me to realize these steps, and it has not been chaotic. I mean, when you're in the details, it feels like it, but when you sit here and say, we did these things in a chronological order. So I'm pretty proud to share that perspective and believe it will continue to unfold in the same manner.
Beautiful, Diane. The way Diane described that for those of you online is really reminding us all of the miraculous chronology that has played out, even though there certainly probably have been times when it's been frustrating and scary, and there was 2 steps forward, 3 steps backwards, the next thing you know, and then there's a zoom forward, and all kinds of different scenarios have played out on this timeline. But when you look back and you have the gift of time and you have the opportunity to really see what you've come through, you realize in many ways there's something going on that, yes, you are of course making happen, but there's probably also a cosmic element to it, if you will, or spiritual, whatever you want to call it. There's another piece that moves good ideas into the world in a timely fashion that isn't always our timetable. That's the way, when I think of being patient, when I think of the waiting game, I have to stop and remind myself that my timeline is a human timeline. And my preference is to operate on a much wider scale, a cosmic timeline, because I trust, as a person who is a seeker trying to understand life, I trust that there are larger forces operating in our lives all the time. And when we're willing to release the reins a little bit, really, really wonderful and magical things happen. And that certainly has been part of the process here. Go ahead.
Okay. Let me come up and turn around so people can hear me.
Okay.
I just want to point out that this waiting for us has been going on for 16 years. We started with a committee headed by George Kerouac, whom some of you still remember. He's no longer alive, and he was a much valued and loved member of the congregation, who pointed out that we absolutely needed to move, but we couldn't afford to. And he said, this is what has got to happen so that we could move. And we have done what he said had to happen. That's really exciting. And then there was a committee led by Harry Moran, who got so close as to almost buy property. And we still weren't there. And now we're so close. And I, for one, and I think I'm with many other people, I'm really excited about this now. We're going to do this. So that's my memory.
Beautiful, Mary. Thank you. Wonderful. And it's great to think about not the structure, but also the exterior and the interior parts of this experience. Diane, do you want to add something?
So I love what you're saying. I'm a firm believer in always trusting the process, but I'm also a stickler for having a plan, and we have a plan, and it's really important that we stick to that plan and we revise it along the way. And Art's going to talk about that later at our coffee chat. So yes, trust the process and have a plan and implement it, and be open to changing things along the way if new things happen, so that you can, just reassess and make sure that you get to where you want to go.
Beautiful. And John, you want to add something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciated what Amara said in looking at anticipation about boredom. I think one of the road markers on the road to anticipation is boredom. And I was often moved by an article I read by a child psychoanalyst named Adam Phillips, who's a great writer of psychoanalytic things. And the title of his article was On Boredom. And he was addressing the positive aspects of that. And he used a bored child as an example. How I know, having read his article, my children would sometimes come up to me and say, I'm bored. And I always say, well, thanks for telling me. Because what he said is often when a child is bored, a parent will hear that and they'll rush in. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And sometimes that's really necessary. But at other times, if you can let that child sit with the boredom, what he says, it gives room for creativity to bubble up. And I think in all the waiting and anticipating we've been doing, we have numerous examples, several people have spoken to it, of how that creativity has bubbled up and enriched our lives and will continue to do so.
Beautiful. You said it, Amar. How did you say it?
That boredom is like the perfect soil for the seeds of creativity. Which I was like, I did not expect that poeticness.
That was magical.
That came out of my mouth.
Okay, I'm gonna just reiterate some of what was said, and then we'll have just a few moments of quiet contemplation. Because again, each one of us has a responsibility to take ownership of what we're thinking and believing about where we are now and where we're headed. And so it's really important to take stock, to allow yourself to be amazed by it. It's okay to be worried by it too. But as Diane so brilliantly pointed out, both Dianes, a plan is in place, right? We know that. We have structure to what's happening. We can rely and trust, and also we are a community of faith. We must never forget that, because that's a big part of the story. So as Wayne so beautifully pointed out, we already mentioned, we have Viola ministering to both Glens Falls and Saratoga, a bridge between communities, moving into this beautiful new home at some point after years and years of planning and hard work. One of the things that he said too about the active waiting period is that we will remember that a congregation is not the space in which it worships, but the spirit of its community. The rest of you pointed out that there is a possibility that this could be anxiety producing, but we have the option of thinking of it differently. We get to control how we think and feel. Understanding our history too is a beautiful part of life. It's a wonderful choice to make. Reading the history, going back, where have we been? What have we come through? That gives you strength and sturdies you for the journey ahead. We have, as Murray pointed out, this is a 16-year process. That's a teenager. That's an ornery teenager. So there we go. There is a lot here. There's so much, and this is only part of it. There is so much. So we are indeed in a liminal space, but the liminal space is rich. It's rich with humanity, with joy, with history, with contemplation, with faith, with potential. It is this beautiful, fertile soil, and all kinds of wonderful things can grow in this space. We have a tremendous amount on the human level and on the building level, so much to be grateful for and to look forward to. The liminal space is active. We are in an active space right now. There's physical motion, there's emotional motion, there's spiritual motion, and we're all part of it. And I think everyone should also give themselves a little pat on the back. Visitors, thank you for putting up with our personal story. We're glad you're here. But this applies to everything in life, right? Not just the motion of a congregation. This applies to our own lives, how we behave when things are changing. This applies to the life of a family. It applies to the life of a community. I mean, when I came back to Saratoga Springs, I had been away. This was like, I came back for the first time in about 2011. Every member of my family, after I left for college, moved out of Saratoga. My parents did. So we were all gone. I had no reason to come back here until about 2011. And back then, when I came back, I was shocked by what I saw because, of course, it wasn't my little hometown anymore. And it continues to grow and change. And I get to decide, do I still love it? Did I only love it the way it was? Do I miss who I was when it was that way? Which do I miss the most? The old downtown, when the old Victorians were more sort of like crumbling a little bit, when everything wasn't perfect? What do I miss? So I have to think about that. Because I think, quite frankly, I miss being a teenager most of the time. This is a great town, right? This is a wonderful place to be. It's magical. I'm not necessarily missing buildings or roadways or restaurants or anything. I'm missing who I was back then. I have to come to terms with the fact that I'm aging. We all do, each in our own ways. That's part of the process. So let's just take a moment of quiet contemplation as we think about this idea of active waiting, preparation, contemplation, thinking ahead, thinking forward, thinking back, creating conditions of readiness, letting go of the anxiety, trust, have faith. Let's think about what that feels like for each one of us individually.